Travis Wingate. So decided to do another video rather than watch another episode of Brazilian Isles. It's near the end of the day. As a Mormon, born and raised, going on 50 years, I've noticed Mormon behaviors have not tended to follow the precepts of the Book of Mormon. As the introduction says that the Book of Mormon is the most correct book on the face of the earth, yada yada yada, and man will draw nearer to God by abiding by its precepts. And thus it's the keystone of the Mormon religion. And I guess Mormons don't believe in it, as they distance themselves from it because of all of the scientific evidence that have proven that it's plagiarized and it's not historically accurate, or that Joseph Smith used rocks in a hat, or whatever the reason was that Mormons no longer believe in the precepts. And it's a little different. You can still believe in the precepts of the Book of Mormon, even if the book is plagiarized, not an actual history of American Native Indians, and manufactured out of some little boy's mind. As long as the precepts prove correct, the book still is a legitimate part of the religion. And I guess Mormons gave up on that. They don't realize that that can be done. But whatever the reason, Mormons are disobeying the Book of Mormon in a sense. Not in the sense that the Book of Mormon is actually giving commandments, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. It's more of storytelling in which the precepts are the underlining theme of the stories, with occasional definitional information, such as priestcraft. It gives many examples of bad examples of those who practice priestcraft. Priestcraft is a unique word to the Book of Mormon. And it defines it, 2 Nephi 26, I believe. Yeah. And it's where you're a wolf in sheep's clothing, basically put. You pretend to be a religious person caring for the welfare of your followers, and yet you just take money from them. You're conning them so that you can have a nice lavish lifestyle and be popular in their eyes and well loved. Whereas the people end up suffering prosperity gospel. That's what it's called currently in our American society. It's where the religious leaders of the various churches, they tell their followers that the more they donate so that they can get a third yacht or a fifth jetliner to do God's work. Why do you need 5 again? But station 1 around the world in every location, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it's a very basic principle. It's using religion as a front for a money scheme. We have laws against that, the RICO laws specifically, protection racket, and pyramid schemes, and the such. And unfortunately, Mormons are not able to recognize this, or they have given up wanting to recognize it, as they treat the church as a social club or whatever excuse they give for staying in the church. so they don't see that the church is requiring it of them. You can't get into the temples to perform the rituals without paying up. And Isaiah, which is copied over into the Book of Mormon, come by without price. It's referring to the temple rituals. You shouldn't have to pay a protection racket to get into the temple to receive the eternal ordinances. And yeah, if you notice, during this coronavirus, as today's 12.71% testing, which was low, it still ended up to be almost 13%, puts us in red in Utah. And yet, school's still going to open next week. Some are the end of August, but I did see a couple out of the 3 that I checked to see how soon Utah would open up their schools. You know, it's one thing to con people out of money, it's another thing to cause their death by your negligence and your outright hatred and desire for money and praise from the world, which you don't get praise from the world with this. You can't just say, oh, look at us, our numbers are low, we're opening up for business, we're opening up schools, people are going back to work, so they're not getting the free loading money. And that's another thing with priestcraft, is that during a crisis where people can't obtain a job and need welfare because we're not following the law of consecration. We've got it in our temples, but it's now a loyalty oath to give everything to the church, to protect the church at all costs, rather than we're giving our labors, whether it be money or products, to the church, and they put it in a storehouse, and then they redistribute it to everybody who has need. And so that's the law of consecration in the economic sense. It's not based on money. And it's right there in the Book of Mormon, under priestcraft. If you labor for money, you'll perish. You labor for Zion. It's not a monetary system that we're supposed to have in the Mormon church. And yet the church is heavily involved in the monetary systems of the world, as they keep it a secret as to what their finances are, but with the 100 billion scandal, we know that they have at least trillions, because that's the modus operandi of all of the financial interests they have. And so the little bit of millions that they do give in charity every year is a very small 0.000%. And so the Zoramite story is another example of which Mormons are not following. The rich Mormons, and it's especially seen in Utah because the residential areas are zoned for the rich versus the poor. And gerrymandering is also designed based upon those boundaries, because the poor tend to side with Democrats rather than Republicans. So they have to rig the system to make sure Republicans stay in power here in Utah. The rich believe that their righteousness has prospered their lives, and that's why they're rich and prosperous, because of their righteousness. And so then they fall victim to the error of the rich Zoramites in accusing the poor Mormons on the west side mostly, or downtown, or wherever the zone is, of being lazy because they're not rich and prosperous. They're not reading their Book of Mormon. They're not saying their prayers. They're not going to church. They're not going to the temple. Whatever excuse that they themselves are not following 100% either. But because they're rich and prosperous, they don't really need all those minute details in life until they commit a serious sin. And then they go, oh, I slacked off on my scripture study, and therefore the video Together Forever that we had on our missions. Pretty soon the woman at the office starts looking better and better, and your family starts looking worse and worse, and before you know it, boom, you've lost everything. He committed adultery. He cheated on his family, his wife. I remember the moment when I finally caught on to that. Of course, it was just an actor playing the role, reading a script, but yeah, if you're rich and prosperous, only serious sin is how you fall. They don't consider that if you look down on those who are poor and don't give of their substance, because again, if you follow a monetary system, you will perish. So Jesus and the rich man, I'm obedient in everything. What else do I have to do to get eternal life? Give up your wealth to the poor. Follow me. But I'm filthy rich. I don't want to do that. So you have to pay attention. When you have billionaires who are only donating millions, check the percentage. And so then you go to Jesus and the widow's mite, where the widow only had the mite to give, and she gave it. And that's 100% that she gave. And then these rich Pharisees and such, they flaunt their wealth with the clothing that they have, and then have everybody watch as they give a lot of money compared to a widow, of course. But the percentage is what you check. And so rich Mormons in Utah have missed the lesson of the Zoramites. Even worse when you realize that the poor Zoramites were the employees building the synagogue. And that when they finished building the synagogues, they were unemployed. So they weren't lazy. They built the buildings that the rich are enjoying. That's slave economy, where the rich don't do the work but enjoy the benefits. There's an old children's story about the mother hen. She wants help planting her farm with the wheat, and everybody has excuses why they don't want to help her. And then harvest time comes, everybody has excuses still. Then she wants to make bread, everybody has excuses still. And then they smell the bread as it's baked, and they say, hey, that smells really good, can we have some? People don't want to do the work, but they sure want the reward. And that's the rich. That's slave owners. That's our economy in the United States of America. We haven't gotten rid of slavery. We just changed the names. Slave owner to CEO of a corporation or a board of directors or investors. Corporate investors. And the slaves are employees. And then they'll say, oh, well, we pay them the government-required minimum wage. What more do they want? Let them have cake and eat it too. And so then they wonder why those who are receiving a minimum wage are forced to steal, cheat, lie, destroy other people's lives to try to get ahead in life and survive. And of course the police systems are in place to go after them. That's what I saw in Chicago, news story. People decided to loot and 100 people were arrested for looting. And the police chiefs and the mayors are all condemning the act. And then you think, wait a minute, the mayors and the governors and the police, they're all causing the economic disparity. And so, because they caused it, the people then are trying to survive the only way they can, and that's to commit crime, to steal. And so now they're getting punished for that which they have been predisposed to do by those in charge. And that comes from Utopia, Thomas More. Or you can watch Drew Barrymore's Ever After, I think it is. It's a Cinderella take. But that's what happens when you cause economic disparity. People have to live. And so with the coronavirus and the second stimulus that we may or may not be getting, they want to give less. Seriously? They know what's going to happen. That's exactly why they're doing it. Because if you remove the people from voting, guess who remains in office? The only thing is America strong enough to fight for freedom like we did in the Revolutionary War? Even the Civil War. And I don't see it. America has placed the chessboard to their advantage. They put the governors, the attorney generals, the judges, they put them all in position. And the police force, they've been training them through the unions to treat civilians as the enemy. And so, yeah, protests against police brutality is met with police brutality. But I don't understand why Mormons have given up on the Book of Mormon. It just boggles my mind. They know the precepts and the stories of the Book of Mormon. They know about the Zoramites, the poor and the rich, yet the rich still say, oh, I'm rich and prosperous, therefore I'm righteous. It's because of my righteousness. Maybe because of the CES instructor who created the pride cycle. The pride cycle is just a cycle of wickedness. The Nephites are never righteous in that cycle. Because when they're prosperous, they think it's because of their righteousness. And Mormon or Moroni, whoever's writing about it, says it very clearly. They believe. But the CES instructor has become popular in the eyes of Mormons and put it in the manuals for CES. And so the pride cycle is well known in the church, but nobody catches on. The Nephites are never righteous in this cycle. They were wicked with pride, at least when they were rich and prosperous. And that's why they fell. And that's the cycle. And so they never really repented. They just felt bad that they were no longer rich and prosperous. And that's what I worry, is when destruction comes, and Trump is doing his darndest to speed up the process, Mormons, will they recognize that it was the monetary system in the first place that held them in bondage? Or will they realize that it was just, now that they're poor, that it must be because of their wickedness? That they were too proud and therefore weren't able to keep their wealth and prosperity. And so that they'll then go back to cheating and stealing and lying to rise up in monetary value again and prosperousness. So, anyway, final thoughts for the day.